There were great cities that the gods had created, but if it was some kind of a hellacious earthquake, it would have destroyed those cities and people. Which brings up the subject, of course, of Atlantis, because that's the story of Atlantis. Atlantis was a great and godly kind of place with high spiritual beings from other worlds, we're told. They were supernatural creatures, and they lived in this area called Atlantis. And then it says, and all the great fountains of the deep were broken up. Well, if they were broken up, you see going down the middle of the Atlantic is a earthquake fault. That's a big one. It's like the San Andreas fault. And the U.S. Navy has photographed the ocean's bottoms for military purposes. But it's interesting, they photographed the Great Fault going down through the Atlantic Ocean. So it very well could have been great civilizations or islands out there. And this fault went, and when it did, it took with it all civilization that was at that time. Incidentally, on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean today, 10 miles north of Bimini, the last little island in the Bermuda Triangle of islands, 10 miles north of Bimini, the island of Bimini, is called the Bahama Banks. And in the Bahama Banks is a huge pyramid with an all-seeing eye at the top, larger than the pyramid in Egypt, sitting on the ocean floor. U.S. Navy has taken pictures of it. They've had stories and books written about it. There's a huge pyramid with an all-seeing eye sitting on the ocean floor 10 miles north of Bimini in the Atlantic Ocean. I don't know what that's all about, but it's out there, and nobody's tried to explain it. Something's going on in Atlantis, something was going on in the Atlantic. The whole concept of undersea kingdoms have always been around, even scholarly articles about underground bases, underwater bases, even the movie Abyss, the very word abyss in the Bible word abyss means watery deep. So it says the devil comes out of the abyss, or the demons come out of the abyss. The word abyss in the Bible is water. So here we have great temples that are found all around the world under the oceans. This is in the Bermuda Triangle. Even from the satellite, looking down on the Atlantic, you will see some kind of a configuration. Looks like a perfect square and looks like a division of land. This is on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean from the satellite. Most people don't even know this stuff out in the Atlantic that could very well have been some kind of a great civilization, but it's underwater now. And of course, as I said, we know there are many temples all around the world that are covered with water. Off the coast of Cuba, there are whole temples and artifacts, and then of course off the coast of Japan, there are huge temples buried. So it implies that we've had civilizations on this earth for millions of years that you don't know anything about. These temples that are underwater are there and were built by ancient civilizations. We are not the pinnacle of success on the earth, and we are not the smartest. We are degrading. We are degenerating. We're not evolving. We're devolving. So because the people who built the pyramids and the tombs and all of these artifacts in Egypt and around the world were far smarter than we'll ever be. So we are merely seeing the relics of a higher civilization that were here and now are under the ocean. In the Bible, in Job, the oldest book in the Bible in the Old Testament is Job. And that's why we get our word job. The job is a very depressing thing. Well, that's what the story of Job was, a very depressing thing. Yeah. So that's where we get our word job from Job. But anyway, in the book of Job 26, this is the Old Testament, it says, dead things are formed from under the waters, and the inhabitants thereof. Over on the right-hand side is the footnote. It says, dead things are formed from under the waters, which is translated the place where the requiem stay, which is beneath the waters and the things that are therein. What are you talking about, dead things? The dead things is the Hebrew word requiem, or the offspring of fallen angels, akin to the Nephilim. So there are, according to the Bible, Old Testament, there are offspring of the angels, or the sons of God, these creatures who have come here millions of years ago and procreated, and their offspring are able to live underwater in the oceans. So that might explain why you're seeing UFOs coming out of the oceans, a lot of activity over the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, because even the Bible said dead things is requiem, the offspring of fallen angels akin to the Nephilim, or the Anunnaki. So I'm just saying it is at least possible that we have high civilizations from other worlds who are now living on the ocean floor in the Atlantic and Pacific because they can live there. We can't. They're called the Elohim, the Anunnaki. We don't know what they're capable of, but obviously they are far superior to anything they've created, which is us. Jesus comes in contact with a man who is mentally deranged, and it says that he was filled with demons and devils. And it says here in 12, And all the devils besought Jesus, saying, send us into the swine that we may enter into them. If you remember that story where Jesus confronts a crazy man, a wild man, and he says, what is your name? And the man says, I am Legion. We are a legion. And the scripture goes on to say that there was all kinds of devils in this man. And they talked back to Jesus. Not the man, but these spirit entities in the man were talking to Jesus. And they said, we are a legion. And it said the unclean spirits, Jesus said, gave them leave. So Jesus told the unclean spirits of the demons in the man to get out of him, leave him. And it says, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea, and they were choked in the sea. So that's an old biblical story about Jesus chasing the demons out of a man, and they wanted to go into some kind of life forms, because they had to be in some kind of a life form. So Jesus sent them into the pigs. But immediately the pigs ran into the ocean and died. I'm thinking, wait a minute, if in the pigs there are spirit entities, and they are trying to get back into water, and so when the pigs went into the water, the pigs died, the spirits are now in water where they operate best. Well, electricity travels good in water. Water is a very good conductor of electricity, and electricity is a part of the human spirit. So I'm just saying, there could very well be that there were spirits who wanted to get back to the ocean if they couldn't be in a man.